So apparently there are seminars now to help police officers sort of streamline the process of when they seize property from criminals, but they're not taking the advice quite like you think they should. According to the New York Times, the seminars offered police officers some useful tips on seizing property from suspected criminals, but they said don't bother with jewelry because it's too hard to dispose of, and computers, everybody's already got a computer. But the experts counseled they should go after flat screen TVs and cars, especially nice cars. Harry S. Connelly Jr., the city attorney of Las Cruces, New Mexico, called them little goodies. Yay. And then Mr. Connelly described how officers in his jurisdiction could not wait to seize one man's exotic vehicle outside a local bar. Mr. Connelly was talking about a practice known as civil asset forfeiture. That's a fancy phrase.
Otherwise known as robbery.
Yes, I didn't get robbed, I got civil asset forfeitured.
Right, when you do the robbing, it's a robbery. When the cops rob you, it's a civil asset forfeiture.
Isn't that great? It's so pretty the way they say it.
Yeah.
This basically, like Jenk said, it allows the government, without ever securing a conviction or even filling a criminal charge, to seize property suspected of having ties to crime. The practice expanded during the war on drugs in the 1980s.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's think this through. First of all, even if they were to do it, quote, in the right cases, right? So it turns out they seize a car and it's got 800 pounds of heroin in it. Boy, they nailed
That's
it,
a
right?
good day.
Yeah, okay.
Fun afternoon.
And so they take the car. It's already a little messed up because the car had nothing to do with, like you're supposed to punish the guy. You put him in jail for having the heroin, for dealing it. But taking his car, like, what if the heroin's in his house and you take the house? But wait, is it even fair to the other people who live in the house, other people who drove that car? Okay, so even in the best case scenario, this law is not really fair. It's you should punish him for the crime and have nothing to do with the actual car, the house, etc. But in the worst case scenario, what does it lead to? It leads to, that's a nice looking car. Let's go see if there's any pot in it. Maybe we'll get lucky and there'll be pot in it. Maybe we won't get lucky. There'll be no pot in it, but we'll suspect it of having pot. We don't need a conviction. We'll just take the car anyway.
Asset forfeiture.
Exactly.
But I've never understood that, actually. I mean, ever since when I was a little kid and there was, like, these auctions, police auctions, I would say, but they're not their cars. Well, they took their cars, but okay, I still don't get it. They're not their cars. I don't understand how this is happening. So why is it? Why is it happening? Why is it allowed?
I'm not in the least bit saying that this is right or the abuse of this is right, but in theory, I do understand why this law was enacted.
Oh, please explain this.
It was created before people were thought of as just terrible human beings who just exploit laws to their own benefit, as a way to ensure that that person was so heavily penalized that they were less likely to and be in less of a position to be able to recoup and then come back and do the same thing. So for example, because it does mention that you don't need a conviction. Well, especially in the 70s and 80s, my father was a police officer for 42 years.
Oh,
and
we got
he was the deputy
girl.
Superintendent of police for drugs and firearms. So it's probably why I'm in defense of this a bit.
Okay.
So back then it was very, very difficult because of a lot of, that's why the RICO laws and all those things were enacted, but it was very they had to charge them with a whole bunch of other things to be able to get them to stay in jail. Yeah. These people had huge assets at their availability, and as such, they would hire the best lawyers and find ways to buy off whoever it is, and eventually just get off with this crime. And then they would still have all their assets, and within a year or two or whatever time frame, they'd be back in business doing the exact same thing. So these laws so heavily penalized them, so they would find reasons to confiscate their house, confiscate their cars, all of these things, so that they were not in a financial position to as easily recoup and then come back and do these things later on.
So
in theory, I like that part of it.
I get the logic of it, totally.
But there are instances, like a few months ago, I think we covered the story on Pop Trigger, where a young man had, I want to say, an ounce of weed in his possession. Well, he lived with his parents still. He was maybe 23 years old, still lived with his parents. Keep in mind, the weed was not found at the house. The house was seized.
That's crazy. No way. Look, in the old days, I know why they did it, et cetera. And back then, the defendants had a lot of rights. Well, mission accomplished. They don't have those rights anymore.
Right.
Okay. I mean, we have beat the defendants to a pulp. Now the cops have all the rights. And I know back in the day, like Miami Vice and all, they wanted to seize the guy's yacht because it was so hard to convict him. They wanted to at least say, ha, we got your yacht.
Right. Yeah.
Right? I got it, right? We don't live in that day anymore. Now we seize everything. Nobody's got any goddamn rights. We live in a police state. So to take somebody's house for weed that wasn't even in the house, and it's not even their house.
Well, and that's the thing. Like Shauna, it's said, it's one extreme to another.
Exactly.
I mean, they were trying to make the smallest dent because there was really the cops' hands were tied.
Right.
But now we're saying they're telling them, don't bother with the jewelry. It's too hard.
Right. You're only going to get 30% of market value.
Exactly. So the pendulum has swung completely the other way.
And in the end, they've turned into the gangs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so what we need is protection from the guys who are supposed to be protecting us, because they're looking at our shit and saying, maybe I just take
Christmas.
it, right?
Yeah.
And
the
so,
holidays are coming up. I'll get that for my wife.
Right. And unfortunately, we've set the rules and regulations in a way that the cops have become the robbers.
Yeah.